Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere warm. Picture yourself on a sleepy Greek island, Naxos, to be precise, where the sea hushes gently against the shore and cicadas click like 1,000 tiny clocks. The sun's just gone down, and everything smells like salt, wild thyme, and grapes left too long in the sun. You're lying face down in the sand. There's a little seaweed in your hair, something is definitely nibbling your foot, and your mouth tastes like last night's decisions, mostly fermented. You sit up slowly, wincing at the crick in your neck, and realize you don't remember getting here. In fact, you're not entirely sure where here is. You blink up at a sky that's turning lavender, and a gull drops a shell suspiciously close to your head, possibly in judgment. There's no wallet, no phone, and no idea how long you've been asleep. But there is a small gold brooch stuck to your tunic that you don't recognize. Weird. Also, you're wearing one sandal. Classic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time zone you're in. I love seeing how far this sleepy little voyage travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand is cool against your hands as you push yourself up and wobble to your feet. The beach is empty, save for a few rocky outcrops and a single trail of footprints leading inland. Not yours. You squint toward a thicket of olive trees and think, well, either that's the way to safety or straight into a myth. But you're already here, so you might as well follow. You trudge along the winding path, brushing past low-hanging branches and listening to the occasional hoot of an owl that seems to be laughing at you. After a while, the scent of something rich and fruity starts to waft through the air. Wine? Berries? Some unholy combination of both? As you emerge from the trees, you see him. A man in a long robe of deep purple, embroidered with golden vines. He's lounging under a fig tree like it's a 5-star hotel, surrounded by an entourage of creatures and companions, half of whom don't appear entirely human. A woman with ivy braided through her hair offers you a fig and a smile that says, "This is about to get weird, but you'll be fine." The man gestures lazily with a goblet. His voice is low, musical, and unbothered. "Welcome back," he says, as if you were expected. "You missed the morning orgy but stayed just in time for the good part." You blink. He laughs, waves off your confusion, and pats the ground beside him. "Don't worry. Most mortals show up confused. Sit, eat, forget your name for a little while." You sit. Because why not? This isn't the first time in history someone's taken hospitality from a stranger in weird clothing and regretted it later, but hey, at least he's not offering you a wooden horse full of soldiers. And anyway, the fig is phenomenal. You chew slowly, listening as the man talks about grapes and festivals, about theater and ecstasy and the importance of having a healthy disregard for stability. You nod like you understand what that means. "Historians still debate," he says between sips of wine, "whether I was ever truly a god or just a really committed party planner." Then he winks at you. You try to ask who he is, but he brushes it off. Names are heavy things. You can pick one later. For now, let's call me your sponsor. You laugh, a little nervously, but the fig juice has made your fingers sticky and your head floaty, and honestly, nothing has ever felt more dreamlike. A satyr strolls by, playing something on a pan flute that sounds like a goose arguing with a cloud. One of the women drapes a wreath of ivy around your neck. Somewhere in the distance, someone is definitely trying to teach a goat to dance. And yet, you feel oddly at peace. The man, your host, leans in closer. His eyes are bright, ancient, and oddly amused. "Tell me," he murmurs. "Have you ever felt like the sea was calling you by name?" You pause, unsure how to answer that without sounding like you've had a concussion. But then he nods as if you already did. "Good," he says, finishing his wine in one gulp. "Because tomorrow, we sail." Sail? Where? How? You look around. There's no ship. No dock. Just sand and shadows and the strange weight of inevitability. But you've already followed footprints into the woods and accepted fruit from a man with goat-legged friends. What's a little sea voyage? You lie back in the sand, staring up at the velvet dark sky now dusted with stars. The waves murmur lullabies. The fig juice on your fingers grows tacky and sweet. Someone is singing softly in a language you don't know, but your heart seems to remember. The night folds around you like a cloak. You don't know what tomorrow holds, but the man in purple smiles like he's been waiting centuries to show you. And frankly, you're curious. You wake before dawn, unsure if you ever truly fell asleep. The sky is pale gray and smells of dew and distant saltwater. Somewhere nearby, someone is already laughing, a soft, rippling sound like a stream chuckling over stones. Your host, the man in purple, is seated cross-legged by a low fire, toasting something that smells suspiciously like fermented pears. He glances at you and says, "Excellent. You've survived the figs." You nod cautiously, though you're not entirely convinced you have. There's a strange energy in the camp this morning. The satyrs are packing up grapes, musical instruments, and one extremely confused duck. Maenads wrap themselves in sashes that shimmer like fish scales and braid shells into each other's hair. It's not panic. It's pageantry. "We sail today," the man repeats, licking pear syrup off his thumb. "Though I must admit, the boat isn't ours. Yet." You pause mid-stretch. "You don't have a boat?" He waves dismissively. "Logistics. Don't worry, you'll get to meet some of the most charming thieves on the Aegean." By mid-morning, you're hiking up a rocky hill toward a cliffside port where a rather battered ship bobs just off the cove. A group of sunburned men lounge near it, their clothes patched and their eyes sharp. Pirates. Or, as your host calls them, freelance maritime entrepreneurs. You whisper, "We're stealing a pirate ship?" He raises a brow. "Borrowing. We're borrowing their trust. Temporarily." One of the pirates steps forward, grinning, clearly mistaking your group for unarmed travelers in need of a lift. He offers terms, transport in exchange for stories and wine. Your host agrees, enthusiastically. And just like that, you're boarding a ship named the Gentle Mango. You try not to think about whether the mango is the ship, a metaphor, or an ironic threat. Once aboard, you're put to work, though no one can explain your job. You tie ropes. You untie them. You nod solemnly at the mast. Someone hands you a chicken to hold, and you comply without question. This is, apparently, piracy. The ship pulls away from Naxos, slipping over the Aegean like a lazy cat. The water is bluer than should be legal, and the breeze smells like crushed herbs and sun-baked wood. You're not sure what you expected from life at sea, but this isn't it. There's laughter, dancing, and someone playing a harp they absolutely don't know how to play. Wine flows as freely as water, and you quickly learn to step around the patches of grape skins that now litter the deck like confetti from a party you missed. As you lean over the railing, letting the wind whip your hair into knots, your host joins you. "You know," he says conversationally, "I quite like these pirates. They're ambitious, passionate, morally flexible." You glance at him sideways. "And you trust them?" He sips from a goblet you're pretty sure he didn't have a second ago. "Of course not. That's half the fun." A few hours later, the tone shifts. The pirates, who had been jovial and almost too polite, begin murmuring amongst themselves. You overhear words like ransom and divine nonsense. One of them eyes your host's goblet as if calculating how much it might fetch in a Corinthian market. Your host notices too, but instead of panicking, he grins like he's been waiting for this. He walks calmly to the center of the ship and announces, "Gentlemen, I have a confession." The crew pauses. "I am Dionysus," he says. A beat. Then everyone bursts out laughing. One man actually falls over. You expect anger. Or maybe disbelief. But what you get is complete derision. The captain claps Dionysus on the back, mutters something about delusions of wine, and tells the crew to prepare for port. We'll sell this lunatic to the highest bidder, he sneers, and keep the weird one as a mascot. He's pointing at you. You don't love that. But Dionysus? He just chuckles. Historians still debate, he says softly to you, whether that captain ever figured out what went wrong. Then, just as the sails fill with wind, something strange begins to happen. A vine slithers from the base of the mast. At first, no one notices. It curls gently along a rope, blooming with tiny white flowers. Then another vine sprouts from the floorboards, wrapping itself around a barrel. A pirate trips over it and curses, but the words die in his throat as he stares. Grapes, plump, dark, and dripping, begin to hang from the rigging. The pirates freeze. The wood beneath your feet begins to shift. The grain moves like ripples on water. One of the rope sprouts leaves. The chicken you were holding earlier calmly walks over and pecks a grape off the floor. This seems like a critical moment. Dionysus stands in the center of it all, arms spread, smiling like someone who's just unveiled a very expensive art installation. Welcome, he says, to the floating vineyard. The pirates draw their swords. And that's when the leopard shows up. No one saw it come aboard. One moment there's just crew. The next, a golden-eyed leopard is strolling across the deck, tail flicking, completely unbothered by the laws of physics or maritime safety. The captain stares. What, how, who? The leopard growls. You hide behind a barrel. The chicken joins you. Dionysus pours another goblet of wine and offers it to the beast, who drinks with terrifying daintiness. You whisper, this doesn't seem ideal. Dionysus shrugs. Sometimes a little chaos is necessary. Especially at sea. And while the pirates scramble and the vines tighten and the ship creaks with something not quite natural, you sit back and try to pretend you didn't just steal a pirate ship with a possibly unstable wine god. Honestly, you're doing great. The pirate ship is no longer a ship. Not exactly. It's a garden now, or a festival, depending on which part of the deck you're standing on. The ropes have turned into garlands of ivy. The oars drip honey. There's a cluster of grapes the size of a toddler dangling from the crow's nest. And in the middle of it all, Dionysus lounges on a barrel like a king without a throne, lazily twirling a fig between his fingers. The pirates are unsettled. One of them tries to climb the rigging to escape. The rigging turns into a grapevine and politely lowers him back to the deck. Another attempts to throw Dionysus overboard but finds himself suddenly unable to move, his feet rooted in place, literally. Tiny shoots of time spiral up his ankles as if the deck itself has decided, not today. You, on the other hand, have decided to stick close to the panther. It seems surprisingly tolerant of your presence. You've named it Mango after the ship. You don't tell anyone this. At some point, someone suggests jumping into the sea. It's the captain, of course, the man who first laughed at Dionysus. He's pacing now, or trying to, though it's hard to pace when your boots are slowly turning into planters. He points at Dionysus and demands he stop whatever sorcery this is. Dionysus doesn't answer right away. Instead, he looks up at the sun, then down at the sea, and then directly at you. Did you know, he says, that in some stories, I was raised by nymphs in a cave? Others say I was stitched into Zeus's thigh. Personally, I find them both charmingly inaccurate. You nod slowly, unsure whether this is rhetorical. He turns back to the captain. You took me on your ship thinking I was a lost wanderer. And now you want to cast me off like bad cargo. That's not very hospitable. The vines twist tighter. A few pirates begin to panic. One actually drops to his knees and begins praying, to Poseidon, to Hermes, to anyone who'll listen. Another simply sprints across the deck and dives headfirst into the water. You wait for the splash. But instead, there's a shimmer. A soft pop. And a dolphin arcs out of the sea, sleek and gray and oddly cheerful. You blink. Was that? Yes, Dionysus says, as casually as if you'd asked him about the weather. The rest of the pirates don't take long to follow. Some jump willingly. Others trip or are gently nudged overboard by Mango, who appears to be enjoying his role as deck enforcer. With each splash, there's a shimmer in the air, a sound like silk being torn in reverse, and then another dolphin emerges, flapping or squeaking or spinning through the water. Historians still debate, Dionysus murmurs, whether the transformation was a punishment or a gift. Personally, I think dolphins have an excellent work-life balance. You edge toward the rail, peering down at the growing pod of dolphins now swimming alongside the ship. They leap and roll in the surf, utterly unbothered by the laws of gods or men. The captain is the last to resist. He clutches the mast, which is now a blossoming olive tree, and shouts something unintelligible, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. But even he, eventually, loses his grip. The ship gives a great shudder, like it's exhaling. He tumbles overboard with a splash and a final yell. Another dolphin appears. You wait. Just to be sure. Dionysus lifts his goblet in a toast. To redemption, he says, or at least to having better fins than judgment. The sea calms. The vines recede slightly, loosening from the mast and the rails, as if satisfied. The panther yawns and curls up beside you, its breath warm against your ankle. You glance around. It's just you and Dionysus now. And the ship, which has quietly returned to being mostly wood, though the smell of crushed grapes will probably linger forever. Dionysus takes a long drink, then offers you the goblet. You hesitate, but only for a moment. It tastes like sunlight and sleep and something you can't quite name, like laughter you haven't laughed yet. You didn't jump, he says, not as a question. No, you reply softly. He smiles. Good. You sit beside him as the sun dips lower, casting long golden fingers across the water. Dolphins leap in lazy arcs beside you. One of them might be humming. You don't ask where you're going next. Because somehow, you already know the destination doesn't matter anymore. Not when you're sailing with a god who turns pirates into sea creatures and wine into weather. Still, you wonder aloud, so, what happens to them now? Dionysus shrugs. They get to live free. They get to swim. They tell stories to the seaweed and tease fishermen. Occasionally, they save drowning poets. It's not a bad gig. You nod. Do they remember who they were? He leans back, eyes half-lidded. Only the parts worth keeping. You don't know if he's talking about them or about you. But you sit quietly as the stars begin to prick through the evening sky. The wind shifts. The ship glides forward, still bound for somewhere unnamed. And in your bones, you feel it. You've passed a threshold. You're no longer a passenger on a ship. You're a guest in a myth. The next morning, you wake to the sound of flutes and the deeply concerning realization that the ship is covered in goats. Not a lot of them, just enough to raise questions. There's one perched on the prow like a hood ornament. Two more are delicately nibbling the rigging. One is asleep inside a crate of dates. You meet its gaze. It blinks slowly, like this is all very normal. You stretch, your back protesting from sleeping against a barrel of, well, you hope it was grapes. Dionysus is already awake, seated cross-legged near the helm, playing a small lyre with what looks like casual disinterest. He sees you, raises an eyebrow, and nods toward the goats. Don't worry, he says. They're not hallucinations. Yet. You make a mental note to revisit the word yet later. The ship rocks gently beneath you. There's no land in sight, just sea, sky, and an ever-expanding sense that you've slipped completely off the edge of history. Dionysus seems completely at ease. You, on the other hand, are beginning to realize this voyage is less sailing itinerary and more cosmic field trip. He sets down the lyre and tosses you something. You catch it awkwardly, a pomegranate, cracked open, its seeds glistening like tiny rubies. Breakfast, he says. And a lesson. You sit across from him and nibble at the fruit. It's sharp and sweet, and you suddenly understand why ancient poets wouldn't shut up about it. Let me ask you something, he says. What makes a god? You blink. Power? He smiles. Everyone says that. But I think it's stories. You become what people say about you. I wasn't born a god, you know. You raise an eyebrow. No? He leans back, resting against the wine-stained wood of the ship. I was mortal. Sort of. Twice born, raised by nymphs, hidden from Hera in a cave full of bees. One day I was just a boy learning to ferment honey, the next, I was being offered altars and carved into statues. A goat chews thoughtfully beside you, as if deeply invested in this character arc. Historians still debate, Dionysus says, plucking a grape from a low-hanging vine, whether my divinity was earned, inherited, or simply voted on at a really good symposium. You nod slowly. So, you're saying you became a god because people needed one? I'm saying, he replies, that belief is a sort of alchemy. Enough mortals tell the same story, and it becomes the truth, especially if it involves wine. You take another bite of the pomegranate, and the juice dribbles down your wrist. Something about this moment, this ship, this sky, this increasingly philosophical goat cruise, feels like a painting. The kind that hangs in a gallery with a vague title like Transcendence No. 3. As if reading your thoughts, Dionysus rises. We're almost there. There, you echo. He gestures toward the horizon. And you realize, land is beginning to rise from the sea. Not just any land. An island wrapped in mist, green and gold and entirely too idyllic to be real. You swear you can hear music, harps, drums, something that sounds suspiciously like synchronized clapping. And is that cheering? The ship glides closer. The dolphins escort you in, leaping through the foam like enthusiastic tour guides. You spot terraced vineyards climbing up the cliffs, trees hung with ribbons, and people in brightly colored robes dancing in spirals on the beach. As you disembark, goat in tow, you realize the celebration is for Dionysus. Of course it is. Garlands are tossed, drums beat louder, and a group of children pelt you with petals like you're the guest of honor. Someone hands you a cup of something fizzy and herbal. You drink it without asking what's in it, which, in retrospect, is probably how you got into this whole situation in the first place. Still, it tastes amazing. The revelers lead you into a large courtyard shaded by fig trees. There's no formal temple, just a circle of stones, some well-loved cushions, and an altar covered in jugs of wine, woven baskets, and what appears to be a very large wheel of cheese. Someone whispers in your ear, "This is sacred cheese. Only step on it if you want to become a goat forever." You don't step on it. A woman with silver paint on her cheeks offers you a seat. Dionysus sits beside you, smiling as the ritual begins. It's not what you expect. No fire. No chanting. Just a slow, melodic humming. People pass bowls around, whispering wishes into them. A man jebbles figs for a few giggling children. A girl releases a dove that lands immediately on Dionysus's head, which he accepts with regal indifference. You turn to him. So this is worship? He nods. Joy is a form of reverence. Pleasure can be devotion. You sit with that. A small procession of elders comes forward and presents Dionysus with offerings, olive oil, pressed flowers, a poem written on bark. He thanks each of them like a proud uncle. As the ritual winds down, he leans over and says quietly, "This island was once ruled by a man who banned all wine. Claimed it weakened the spirit. Said it made people too joyful for logic." You raise an eyebrow. Let me guess. He's a dolphin now? Dionysus grins. No, that one I just gave a bad harvest and a talking goat. Sometimes justice is more fun when it takes its time. The festivities shift into full-on celebration. People dance in slow, spiraling lines. The music weaves between the vines, and you begin to understand that this isn't a party. It's a philosophy. You've never felt more welcome. Or more like you belong in a story being told by someone very far away. Somewhere between the rhythm of the drums and the flickering lanterns, you forget your old name entirely. By the next morning, you're not sure whether your head is full of dreams or just grapes. You wake curled up on a cushion beneath a fig tree, limbs heavy, brain slow, and a vague memory that at some point during the night you may have learned an entire dance involving wine jugs and a very enthusiastic goat. The goat is now asleep next to you. You're honestly impressed it kept up. The camp is quiet, well, quieter. Someone is softly strumming a lyre nearby. A child is chasing a rooster in slow, lazy circles. Dionysus is, of course, wide awake and entirely too alert, gently encouraging a cluster of vines to braid themselves into a hammock. You sit up with a groan and shuffle over. "Do I still have both eyebrows?" you ask. Your voice is hoarse, but hopeful. He glances at you and nods. "Yes. Though someone tried to crown you with figs. You should probably thank the goat." You do. The goat ignores you. Dionysus offers you a cup of something warm and spiced, which smells like honey and wood smoke in the memory of good decisions. You sip it, and slowly, the world reassembles itself into something less blurry. The island, you realize, is already changing again. There's something about worship, Dionysus says softly, that makes people restless. Joy flares up like a fire, but it burns fast. Before long, they need new reasons to laugh. You look around. The villagers are packing up banners, coiling the ribbons, folding their brightly colored robes like this is all just another Tuesday. "Is the party over?" you ask. He smiles. "The party always moves." A little later, you find yourself walking with Dionysus along a shaded path, winding through olive groves that hum with bees. He tells you stories as you go, casually, like you're strolling through a museum he built in his sleep. There's one about a woman who tried to distill ambrosia into perfume, accidentally inventing essential oils and the world's first pyramid scheme. Another about a satyr who mistook a beehive for a helmet and was worshipped briefly as the god of poor choices. Historians still debate, Dionysus says, whether that satyr ever realized he wasn't famous for courage. You laugh, despite yourself. The path opens up to a rocky ledge overlooking the sea. Down below, nestled into the cliffside, is a small harbor. A different ship waits, sleeker, with painted eyes on the prow and sails that shimmer faintly even in the shade. You blink. "Another ship?" Dionysus nods. "You didn't think we'd stay here forever, did you?" You glance back at the camp, the firelight, the people, the goat still chewing on someone's sandal, and feel an unexpected tug. You're not ready to leave, not entirely. But you're also curious. And in Dionysus's world, curiosity is more than enough reason to move. You help load the new ship. This time, there are no pirates. Just a handful of smiling women and men who sing as they work, each one wearing some combination of ivy and confidence. They greet you like an old friend. One of them hands you a bundle wrapped in linen, grapes, herbs, and a small carved figure shaped like a dolphin. You look to Dionysus, confused. "For luck," he says simply. "And because you didn't jump." You store it in your bag, which now smells permanently like fermented fruit and mystery. As the ship pulls away from the island, the villagers on shore raise their arms in farewell, and the dolphins leap once, twice, 3 times beside the hull. You wave, and for a moment, you think you see your own reflection in the water, shimmering, smiling, just slightly not quite you. The journey continues. This ship feels different. Not just in build, but in mood. Less raucous. More contemplative. Dionysus lounges near the stern, absently humming to himself, while one of the sailors paints symbols along the rails, eyes, spirals, little bunches of grapes. You sit near the bow, watching the sea unfold in endless shades of blue. Somewhere ahead, another island waits. Probably with more goats. You turn back. Where to next? Dionysus leans his head back, eyes closed. Somewhere people have forgotten how to laugh. They're always the best audiences. A breeze picks up. The sails billow, catching light as though stitched with sunlight. The others begin to sing. It's a strange tune, half lullaby, half sea shanty, but it sinks into your bones and makes your eyelids heavy. You lie back against a coil of rope, letting the warmth of the deck seep into your skin. The air smells like citrus and pine and the faintest trace of wine-soaked laughter. The sea rocks you gently. You feel the story continuing, inside you now, not just around you. You wonder how many others, long ago, took this same strange voyage. How many mortals were plucked from boredom and dreams and dropped into a myth just to see what they'd do? And as you drift, just slightly, towards sleep, you realize you're not just in the myth anymore. You're helping write it. By midday, you're back on the open sea. The waves glitter like scattered coins, and the ship glides so smoothly it feels more like flying than sailing. The crew doesn't talk much, at least not in words. They hum, gesture, and occasionally burst into full-throated laughter at jokes no one tells out loud. Even Mango the panther seems calmer, stretched out like a furry throw rug at the stern. Dionysus lounges nearby with a bunch of grapes and a flute made of bone, not in a creepy way, just historically resourceful. He plays a few odd notes, then grins. "You've been quiet," he says without looking at you. You shrug. "I'm trying to figure out what's real." He pauses mid-note. "Ah, that old game." You sit beside him, the sun warming your back. "I mean, is this all actually happening? You? The dolphins? That goat who could juggle?" Dionysus laughs so hard he nearly falls over. You're asking if reality includes a juggling goat after watching a ship blossom into a vineyard mid-ocean. Fair, you admit. He flicks a grape stem into the sea and stretches. Reality is just a strong consensus with good timing. And a few really stubborn historians. You tilt your head. "So, what now? We just sail around confusing mortals?" "Not always," he says. "Sometimes we teach them things." "Oh, you ask. Like what?" Dionysus smiles. "Like how to throw a decent lunch." That's when you notice the coastline creeping up over the horizon, jagged cliffs and white stone buildings stacked like playing cards, shimmering in the sunlight. He doesn't even have to tell you where you are. Athens. And it's having a very bad day. As the ship docks at a quiet inlet, Dionysus hands you a light cloak embroidered with ivy and moths. "Try not to look too immortal," he says. They get twitchy. You wrap the cloak around you and disembark, following him up a dusty trail. The streets of Athens are unusually subdued. No music. No street performers. No drunk poets trying to seduce statues. Just quiet. Too much of it. You pass through a marketplace where the fruit stalls are oddly empty and the bakers are selling plain bread. Just plain. No sesame. No olives. No joy. Dionysus grimaces. They banned fun again. You blink. Again? He nods. Happens every few decades. The city gets nervous. Someone decides that dancing leads to chaos, which leads to broken amphorae, which leads to economic ruin. So they outlaw wine, theater, and spontaneous emotion. It never lasts. You walk together through the agora, the clatter of sandals echoing against marble. Statues of stern-looking men loom above you, Plato, Socrates, one guy who might just be frowning because he had bad lentils once. Historians still debate, Dionysus murmurs, whether these bans were about morality or just terrible party planning. You chuckle softly, but the weight of the silence presses in. Then you turn a corner and almost trip over it. A door. Tiny, wooden, plain. But there's something about it that hums against your ribs. Dionysus grins. Ah. There it is. He knocks twice, then once, then twice again. The door opens, and music spills out like wine from a cracked jug. You step inside. It's a cellar, cool, dark, and pulsing with rhythm. Lanterns flicker. Cushions line the walls. At least 30 people are packed into the space, drinking from clay cups and swaying to a beat tapped out on amphorae and tabletops. Someone hands you a figure. You take it without thinking. It tastes like rebellion. This, Dionysus explains, is the Underfestival, a secret gathering of those who refuse to let joy be legislated. They meet in basements and olive presses and abandoned scroll libraries. They call it quiet celebration. You call it gutsy. A woman stands in the center, wearing a crown of rosemary and cracked amphora shards. She's performing a monologue about a chicken who refused to lay eggs until given better housing conditions. The crowd is in stitches. You look to Dionysus, amazed. You didn't start this? He shakes his head. They started it. I just watered it. Later that night, the music grows softer. The wine flows slower. You sit with Dionysus near the edge of the circle, watching as people hum old hymns, not solemnly, but sweetly, like lullabies meant to soothe the bones of tired cities. One young man turns to you, eyes bright. You're one of his, aren't you? You pause. What do you mean? He shrugs. You didn't run. You didn't drown. You stayed. You glance at Dionysus, who says nothing, just smiles over his wine cup like he's heard this before. You nod, slowly. I guess I did. As the crowd begins to drift off into shadows and sleep, Dionysus offers you his hand. Ready to go? You rise. Not because you're tired, but because you've never felt more awake. Outside, the night is still and clear. A breeze stirs the olive trees. Somewhere, a statue of Socrates tips slightly to the left, like even he's reconsidering everything. You walk down the dark streets together, the sound of distant laughter echoing softly behind you. The quiet doesn't feel oppressive anymore. It feels like anticipation. Back on the ship, the sails are already full. The crew has returned, smiling, sleepy, a little wine-stained. Someone's draped a garland over Mango, who bears it with the weary dignity of a beast who's seen too many toga parties. You step aboard last, and the moment your feet touch the deck, the ship shudders like it's been waiting for you to come home. Dionysus offers no explanation, just a grin. Athens was lovely, don't you think? Even when she's trying not to be. You nod. They remembered how to laugh. And that, he says, is all it takes. The ship pulls away in silence, save for the creak of wood and the soft flapping of the sails. You sit at the bow this time, watching the city shrink behind you. For a brief moment, you wonder if they'll remember. If the basement songs and secret figs will blossom into something louder. Some will, Dionysus murmurs beside you. Some always do. You don't ask how he knew what you were thinking. At this point, you've stopped questioning the weird overlaps of thought and timing. If anything, they're becoming comforting, like falling asleep and hearing your dreams narrated back to you. Later, the wind shifts. And with it, the light. The sun dips low on the horizon, casting the sea in copper and deep violet. You watch the colors change and feel a tug, not behind your navel or your heart, but something older. Something ancestral. Where are we going now, you ask? Dionysus tilts his head, as if listening to a far-off drumbeat only he can hear. To the edge of memory. You stare at him. That's not a place. He smiles. Isn't it? By nightfall, the ship begins to drift differently. The sea grows glassy. The stars above sharpen, multiplied tenfold, brighter than you've ever seen, clustered in strange formations. Even the constellations seem slightly wrong. A bear where there should be a lion. A harp where there should be a scorpion. You turn to Dionysus, unease tickling your neck. Where are we? He breathes deep. Where stories go to rest. The crew grows quiet, their movements reverent. No one plays music. No one jokes. The ship slows as if pushing through velvet. And there, emerging from the horizon, is an island like none before. It isn't land in the traditional sense, it's more like a memory made solid. Hills made of folded scrolls. Trees with bark that glows faintly with script. Rivers that hum lullabies in forgotten languages. The sand is pale as parchment, and the clouds above it shift like faded ink. You dock without a sound. Dionysus leads the way down the gangplank, footsteps silent on the dock. You follow, feet sinking slightly into the soft, yielding earth. The air smells like dust and cloves and the faintest trace of burnt sugar. "What is this place?" you whisper. "The archive," he replies. "Where all forgotten myths sleep. Even mine." You pass through groves of whispering reeds and rows of broken statues, half sunk in the earth. Some you recognize, a chipped likeness of Orpheus, his lyre worn down to a blur. Others are strangers, their faces half-formed, as if no one ever finished believing in them. You walk among them like a dreamer inside someone else's nap. Eventually, you reach the center of the island, a shallow pool of perfectly still water, reflecting not the stars above but flickers of story, flashes of myth. A boy chasing the sun in a chariot. A woman turning into a tree. A god weaving stars into a lion's mouth. Dionysus kneels beside the pool and dips his fingers in. The ripples that follow shimmer with color and sound. "This," he says softly, "is where stories come to rest when no one tells them anymore. Myths that once lit fires in the minds of men, now just echoes." You sit beside him, watching the images flicker. "Will they ever come back?" you ask. He shrugs. "Some will." A child hears an old song. A grandmother repeats a half-remembered tale. And suddenly, he snaps his fingers, they rise again. He leans toward the water and murmurs something. A few ripples, a flicker of golden leaves, and you realize he's speaking to the myth itself. Like an old friend. Or an ex who still sends him weird dreams. "Historians still debate," he says, eyes on the water, "whether stories shape people, or people shape stories. Personally, I think we take turns." You watch the pool, mesmerized. And then, unexpectedly, you see yourself. A shimmer of your own face. Your eyes, half-lidded in sleep. Your hand holding a figure. The deck of the ship behind you. Mango the panther, looking suspiciously judgmental. You gasp. Dionysus only smiles. "You're part of the story now," he says. "And stories? They never really end." You sit quietly, feeling the weight of that truth settle over you like a warm blanket. Eventually, the crew calls softly from the shore. "It's time to go." Dionysus offers you a hand up. As you walk back to the ship, you realize something's changed. The stars seem a little warmer. The wood beneath your feet hums a little louder. And when you step aboard, the others look at you, not as a guest, but as one of them. The wind has changed again. It blows softer now, not with urgency, but with intention, as if it knows exactly where you're going, even if you don't. The ship moves like a thought whispered across the sea. You stand at the rail, watching the archive shrink behind you. The memory island fades not into distance, but into unreality, dissolving into sky and water like a forgotten dream. Dionysus joins you, 2 cups in hand. He passes you one. This time, you don't ask what's in it. He raises his own in a toast. "To the ones who remember," he says. "And to the ones who forget, but still feel something stir." You clink cups, because what else can you do? The drink is warm, tinged with clove and some sharp fruit you can't quite name. It tastes like the color gold feels. You sip slowly, and something inside you begins to loosen, like a rope unwinding from a post it's been tied to for too long. The journey resumes. Hours pass, or maybe days. Time has gotten squishy. The crew hums familiar songs that don't belong to any particular place. Someone starts carving tiny dolphins into the rail. Mango naps. You help coil ropes that don't need coiling, just to feel useful. Then, just before dusk, land appears again. But this time, it's not an island. It's a city. Low hills crowned with houses. Faded frescoes painted on stucco walls. A market square with no stalls, just outlines and dust. Trees that sway without wind. And, just off the harbor, a toppled statue of a woman holding a flute, half submerged in the shallows. The ship drifts to a stop. No anchor. No dock. Just stillness. Dionysus places a hand on your shoulder. This, he says, was Eleuthерus. You wait, sensing the story before he speaks it. A long time ago, he begins, this city held a festival so wild, so loud, it shook the mountain. For 7 nights, the people danced in masks, drank sacred wine, sang hymns too old for grammar. They believed the line between mortal and God should be thin enough to dance across. He walks with you down the gangplank. The water is ankle deep, the ground soft with moss and silence. And then, he continues, someone decided that was too dangerous. You explore the city together. There are amphora shards scattered like autumn leaves. Doorways open into rooms where vines grow from the floor. A faded mural shows people with animal heads and wings, locked in a spiral dance with stars in their palms. You stop before a broken column. Carved into the base is an image of Dionysus himself, less refined than you're used to. Wild-eyed. Hair tangled with ivy. A panther at his feet. A torch in one hand. A cup in the other. He looks more like a storm than a deity. Dionysus gazes at it for a long time. I didn't come here for centuries, he murmurs. Too many quiet ghosts. Too much regret. He kneels, touches the moss growing at the statue's base. But memory is a strange thing. Cities die. Myths fade. But sometimes, they wait. Not for resurrection, just for someone to walk through and remember. You do. Quietly. Carefully. You run your fingers along the wall of a collapsed theater. Sit in the weeds where the orchestra once played. Imagine the laughter echoing, the feet stomping in rhythm. You can almost smell it, wine and sweat and honey cakes. Historians still debate, Dionysus says, sitting beside you, whether Eleuthерus fell because of drought, war, or divine punishment. He glances sideways. But we know better, don't we? You nod. It fell because someone decided joy was dangerous. And forgot that joy is how you survive danger. Night falls. No stars this time, just a velvet dark, deep and slow. Lanterns glow along the ship's deck like sleepy fireflies. You and Dionysus return in silence, feet wet with memory. On board, the crew says nothing. They hand you a dry cloak. Someone hands you a warm fig cake. You accept both without words. It's enough. That night, you don't dream. But the city of Eleuthерus stays with you, folded behind your eyes, pulsing like the last note of a hymn long forgotten. And somehow, you know, it's not truly gone. Not while someone still remembers how it felt. The sea feels different in the morning. Not stormy. Not angry. Just dense. As if the air itself has thickened with meaning. Even the gulls keep their distance. The ship creaks with a kind of reverence, and the crew speaks in hushed tones. Dionysus stands at the helm, his face unusually still. We're close, he says. You don't ask where. Because by now, you understand, destinations don't announce themselves. They reveal. The ship coasts into a bay surrounded by low, jagged cliffs. No ports. No statues. Just a rocky inlet and a narrow trail winding upward into pine-covered hills. There's no welcome, no music. Just the sound of cicadas and the weight of whatever this place used to be. As you step onto the shore, you catch the scent of iron and wildflowers. The path under your feet is old, older than paving stones, older than myth. Worn smooth by sandals and prayers. Dionysus walks ahead, silent. Eventually, the trail opens into a wide plateau ringed with standing stones. Some are cracked. Some scorched. One is blackened by what looks like ancient fire. In the center lies a stone altar, weathered nearly smooth by wind and time. You step closer, feeling something in your chest flutter. This, Dionysus says quietly, is where I died. You freeze. He doesn't look at you, just walks around the altar slowly, touching the stones like checking in on old friends who've grown tired waiting. Killed by titans, he says. Torn apart. Boiled. Devoured. Depending on the version you like. You don't speak. Because what do you say to a god who's telling you about his own murder? And yet, he says, now tapping the edge of the altar with one finger, here I am. Twice born. Reassembled. Rewritten. Made divine not because I avoided death, but because I didn't stay dead. He looks up at you. You understand the difference? You nod, slowly. You became more than the story that tried to end you. Dionysus smiles, soft and sad. That's the trick, isn't it? Myths don't survive because they're invincible. They survive because someone keeps telling them anyway. You walk among the stones. You see etchings in languages no one speaks anymore. A faded carving of a tree split in half. A set of footprints chiseled into the stone floor, as if someone tried to run but turned to legend instead. Historians still debate, Dionysus mutters, whether this was ever real. Whether it's metaphor or memory. He shrugs. But the gods remember. And so does the earth. You reach the far end of the plateau, where the view opens up to the sea again. Below, your ship waits like a dot on the water, patient and still. And there, nestled in the rock beside you, you see it. A small bowl carved into the stone. Filled with rainwater. Stained faintly with wine. You dip your fingers into it. It's cool. Sweet. And for a moment, just a breath, you see him. The boy, not the god. Curly-haired. Laughing. Chased by sunlight and unkind fate. Holding a sprig of ivy like it might save the world. You feel his heartbeat. Fast. Hopeful. Then the vision fades. And Dionysus is there again, whole and present and casually eternal. You didn't have to show me this, you whisper. I know, he says. But you stayed on the ship. You saw the dolphins. You ate the pomegranate. He pauses. You're part of the myth now. The two of you sit on the stones for a long while. Not talking. Just listening, to the wind, to the quiet hum of time, to the way memory wraps around places like vines clinging to ruins. Eventually, Dionysus stands. Come on, he says. We've got one more stop before sunset. And I'm pretty sure they've been saving us a table. You walk back to the ship. The sea feels warmer now. Not because it's safer, but because you understand its language. The language of things that die and return. Of stories that break and remake themselves. Of gods who were boys, and mortals who become legends. As the ship pulls away from the stone altar, you look back just once. The plateau shimmers. Then it's gone. Or maybe, remembered. This time, you smell the island before you see it. Roasting figs. Salted olives. Something smoky and spiced that clings to the back of your throat before you've even stepped ashore. Your stomach growls, loudly enough that one of the crew looks over and chuckles under their breath. Dionysus smiles. Ah, finally. Dinner. The ship coasts into a bay so calm it might as well be painted there. Along the shore, torches flicker in a gentle breeze. Stone steps lead up through terraced gardens, and somewhere above, you hear laughter. Real laughter, honest, full-bodied, wine-loosened. You disembark barefoot, the sand warm beneath your feet. The path is lined with rosemary and blooming thyme. As you walk, someone hands you a cup. No explanation. No words. It's tart, chilled, and tastes like apples and memory. You don't question it. At the top of the hill, a wide courtyard opens like a secret kept just for you. Tables sprawl beneath hanging lanterns. The air is thick with music, not instruments, just the rise and fall of human joy. People eat with their hands, drink from shared jugs, and tell stories that sometimes end in laughter, sometimes in tears. You can't tell which ones are mortals and which might be something more. This, Dionysus says, is the feast of unfinished tales. You blink. What does that mean? He gestures around. Everyone here has a story that never got its ending. A song that stopped mid-verse. A myth cut short by war, by silence, by being unpopular with temple authorities. You take a seat. Immediately, a plate appears. Fresh bread, roasted eggplant, pickled figs, a cheese so soft it gives up when you look at it. You eat slowly, reverently, as though each bite is a fragment of something holy. Across from you, a woman with flame-colored hair begins to speak. My tale was interrupted by a goat, she says. You nod, as though that's perfectly reasonable. Another person leans in. I was supposed to fall in love with a sea god, he says, but he turned into a cloud and ghosted me. Literally. Became mist. Around the table, the stories continue. Not epic. Not grand. Just weird. Half-remembered. Beautiful in the way only unfinished things can be. Dionysus sits back, sipping from a clay cup. They gather here every so often, he murmurs. To remind the world that not every story needs an ending to matter. You listen. Not just with your ears, but with something deeper. A man talks about being transformed into a heron by mistake. A girl recalls being born during an eclipse and forgotten by her village because everyone was too busy panicking. An old woman confesses she used to be a river. Not a metaphor, she says. Just a river. Historians still debate, Dionysus adds between bites of honeycomb, whether the feast is a myth itself. A metamyth, if you like. But that's just their way of saying they weren't invited. You grin. The night stretches. Eventually, the food slows. The music softens into the rhythmic clinking of plates and the sighs of full bellies. Someone lights a bonfire in the center of the courtyard. The flames crackle quietly, painting the faces of gods and mortals alike in gold. Dionysus rises. He doesn't raise a cup. He doesn't deliver a toast. He simply says, to the stories that didn't end. And the people who didn't stop telling them. A cheer rises, not loud, but warm. Resonant. You lean back, staring at the stars above. You wonder how many of them used to be stories too. And how many are still waiting to be remembered. Later, someone presses a bundle of warm olives into your hand for the road. Another tucks a tiny scroll into your bag. You don't open it. Some gifts are meant to unfold on their own time. As you make your way down the path, you hear a voice behind you, half song, half whisper. Tell it again. Tell it different. But tell it. You look back, but there's no one there. Just the sea, and the sky, and a courtyard full of people who refuse to be forgotten. You board the ship with olives in your hand and stories tucked under your tongue. And the wind, ever faithful, begins to carry you forward once more. Dawn doesn't come with light this time. It comes with sound. Birdsong, soft and strange, echoing like flutes through a forest you can't see yet. Leaves rustle in a rhythm that feels intentional, almost like percussion. The ship glides forward through thick mist, the water still and quiet as sleep. You lean over the rail. The sea is no longer open, it's winding, narrowing into a river that threads between trees so tall they vanish into clouds. Vines hang like curtains. The mist curls in delicate patterns, revealing glimpses of moss-covered statues and forgotten footpaths that lead nowhere in particular. Dionysus appears beside you, unusually quiet. Welcome to the Grove of Echoes, he says, almost whispering. Here, even the trees remember. You raise a brow. And what, exactly, do they remember? He smiles gently. Every time someone was silenced. The ship brushes gently against a floating dock, nothing more than a few planks held together by ivy. You disembark, the wood soft under your feet. The air smells of myrrh, old rain, and something faintly metallic, like memory pressed into stone. The path is narrow, swallowed by ferns. No one speaks. Even Mango walks silently, tail swaying in thought. Dionysus leads you into a clearing. In the center, a massive amphitheater, carved into the side of a hill and swallowed by forest. Moss crawls over the steps. Roots burst through the stage. And yet, it's still here. Holding its breath. This was where voices went to echo, Dionysus says. A sacred space. You didn't have to be powerful. Just loud. He steps onto the stage and lifts a hand. For a moment, you expect a speech. Instead, he lets the silence settle. Then he whispers, "Speak." And everything changes. The air thickens. The trees lean forward. A breeze stirs the leaves, and with it comes voices, not from Dionysus, but from the very stones beneath your feet. You hear fragments of chants, declarations, monologues shouted into dust long ago. You turn slowly, taking it in. Words swirl around you. I was never meant to be quiet. He stole my ending, so I wrote a new one. This is for my sister, who danced even when they told her not to. You feel your chest tighten. This place, Dionysus says softly, catches every voice that wasn't heard. Every line shouted into wind. Every verse that was buried under louder, older stories. You sit on one of the stone benches, touched by ivy and dew. A girl appears at the far edge of the theater. Young. Barefoot. She opens her mouth, and though no sound comes, the air ripples around her. Her story flows into the grove. Not in language, but in sensation, colors, pain, joy, the shape of being misunderstood and surviving anyway. You understand every word without hearing a single one. She finishes. Bows. Disappears. And then another steps forward. A centaur with cracked hooves. A boy with snake tattoos who vanishes at the ankles. A woman with wings on her shoulders and dirt on her feet. They speak. They gesture. They offer the fragments of themselves that never got applause. You watch, held still by awe. Eventually, the stage empties. Dionysus turns to you. Your turn. Your mouth goes dry. I don't have a myth. Doesn't matter. You step forward anyway. The stone beneath your feet is warm. You close your eyes. And you speak, not a performance, not a poem, but something real. A truth you've carried without realizing. A moment you thought no one noticed. A story that wasn't allowed to matter. And the grove listens. Not with applause, but with understanding. When you finish, the silence feels different. Not empty. Held. Dionysus helps you down from the stage. Do you know what the opposite of forgetting is? He asks as you walk. You shake your head. Witnessing, he says. Not remembering. Witnessing. Letting something be real in your presence. You reach the ship just as the mist begins to thin. The grove behind you hums gently, content. And ahead, the river widens again into open water. The ship sets off. And for the first time, you realize you're not sailing toward something. You're sailing with something. The sea opens wide again. After the dense mist of the grove, this feels like stepping out of a long, warm dream into the clear hush of early morning. The sky above is a soft gray-blue, streaked with pink clouds. Even the crew seems quieter, reflective, still cradling the hush left by the stories spoken among the trees. Dionysus leans against the mast, arms crossed loosely. Well, he says, you've seen where stories go when they're unfinished. Want to see where they begin? You glance around. I thought we already were. He winks. Not quite. Now we're going to the kitchen. You squint at him. The myth kitchen, he clarifies. That doesn't help. But you're already intrigued. The island that rises next is unlike the others. No grand peaks. No gleaming temples. Just soft hills, orchards, and dozens, hundreds, of little pathways winding between clay ovens, loom houses, small shrines with chickens nesting beside them. The whole island smells like cinnamon and freshly turned earth. You disembark into what feels less like a port and more like a village fair that never fully assembled. Old women carry baskets of mint and onions. Children dart between fig trees. A man stirs something in a cauldron while humming a lullaby to a goat wearing a necklace of garlic cloves. Dionysus spreads his arms. Welcome to Koros, the birthplace of background characters. You blink. I'm sorry, what? He grins. Every myth has heroes, Achilles, Hercules, all the sword-hurling, hair-flipping drama. But here's where the others come from. The people who handed them cloaks, cooked their meals, told the wrong directions to the wrong god, and started a minor war. The ones who never got names. He walks up to an old man weaving sandals out of grapevine. The man nods, lifts one finger, and continues his work. That guy? Dionysus whispers. He accidentally gave Odysseus the wrong herbs once. That's why Circe thought he was immune to magic. You laugh. That's not in the epic. He winks. Exactly. You pass a bakery where a woman is shaping dough into miniature amphorae. Next to her, a scroll painter carefully copies out a prayer to a river god known only in one village, and even then, only during plum season. This is where myths ferment, Dionysus says. In small kitchens. With slightly confused grandparents and overly dramatic pets. You turn a corner and find a statue, not of a god, but of a child with a pebble in one hand and a stick in the other. Who's that? The boy who taught Dionysus of me how to juggle, he says. He never made it into the stories. But I remember. You pause to take it in. The statue isn't perfect, its nose is chipped, and a bird has nested in its ear, but there's something deeply right about it. Historians still debate, Dionysus says, whether myth comes from divine inspiration or collective memory. But if you ask me, he picks up a half-burnt honey cake from a windowsill, takes a bite, and speaks around the crumbs. It starts here. In places where people are just bored enough to invent meaning. The rest of the day drifts by like smoke from a temple fire. You visit a woman who claims she taught Apollo to whistle. A beekeeper who says he once lent Demeter a comb. A weaver who invented the concept of metaphor by accident when she misheard the word horse. By dusk, your head is full of names that never made it into scrolls. And yet, you feel their presence more vividly than any hero's tale. The people of Koros gather for a small meal, nothing sacred, nothing planned. Just olives, flatbread, grilled figs, and something that might be pickled lionfish. You eat while seated on the ground next to a man who says he once sneezed in the presence of Hera and lived to tell the tale. At some point, a song begins. It has no chorus. No ending. It just wanders. And somehow, that feels right. You and Dionysus return to the ship under a velvet sky. This place, you say, looking back at the glow of lanterns dotting the hillside, feels like the quiet before the story starts. He nods. It's where the world inhales. And the myths, you whisper, are the exhale. He smiles. And as the ship drifts back into open water, you feel like maybe you've finally figured out the rhythm of this strange voyage. A dance between forgetting and remembering. Between shouting and silence. Between epics and the tiny things that make them matter. The ocean has grown still again. Not calm like before. This stillness is dense, expectant. The sails hang limp, the waves hushed, like the sea itself is holding its breath. You and Dionysus lean against the rail, shoulder to shoulder, watching the horizon blur into nothing. There's one more place, he says, quietly. A place even I don't visit often. You glance at him. Why not? He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestures to the crew, who begin to lower a small rowboat into the water. A lantern is hung at its bow, casting a circle of soft amber across the glassy waves. He nods toward it. This part, you go alone. You hesitate. Why? Because it only speaks to you if you're alone. You climb in. The boat rocks gently as you take your seat. Dionysus hands you the oars, then pauses. Whatever you see, he says, don't try to make sense of it. Just listen. That's what stories want most. You nod. The crew releases the rope, and the little boat floats free. You begin to row. The water is impossibly smooth, like rowing through liquid moonlight. The air smells faintly of myrtle, ink, and old paper. You pass through a narrow curtain of mist and emerge into something that doesn't quite look like the sea anymore. It's memory. Not your memory. Not one person's. But collective memory. A floating patchwork of moments, stitched together by centuries of retelling. You see flickers of them in the water. A woman whispering a story to a baby wrapped in linen. A scribe sneaking a joke into the margins of a sacred scroll. A shepherd inventing constellations just to impress a goat. A priest accidentally mispronouncing a hymn and inventing a whole new god. You drift deeper. Eventually, the water begins to glow from beneath. Soft pulses of color, gold, lavender, deep sea green, like bioluminescent fish made of narrative. You lean over the edge and realize that the light comes from books. Scrolls. Tablets. Clay shards etched with names and prayers and recipes and curses. You are rowing over an ocean of forgotten writing. Dionysus was right, this isn't a place. It's an echo chamber of human need. The need to be remembered. You let the oars rest. The boat drifts. And then, from the stillness, comes a voice. Not out loud. Not even inside your head. But deep within the space between thought and dream. Tell me something I haven't heard, it says. You swallow. What are you? A story that almost was. It sounds tired. Curious. Patient. You close your eyes and speak. You tell it about the grove of lost voices. About the boy who gibbled ivy for Dionysus. About Mango the panther, who snored like a nobleman with a deviated septum. You tell it about Koros and the people who became myths by accident. You tell it about your own small truth, how you never thought you'd matter in a story like this. But now you know the truth, stories don't care who starts them. They care who keeps them alive. The voice doesn't reply. But the water glows a little brighter. You open your eyes. The sea around you is pulsing with soft light, like applause from the waves themselves. And just like that, you understand. This is where nearly forgotten stories go, not to die, but to wait. Wait for someone like you. Someone willing to listen. Someone willing to row into silence and answer the question. Will you carry me home? You dip your hand into the water and whisper, yes. And the boat begins to turn. Not because you row, but because the story has accepted you. As you drift back toward the ship, the mist closes behind you. The voices fade. But the warmth stays with you, tucked under your ribs, curled behind your eyes like a flickering flame. And when you reach the ship again, Dionysus helps you aboard without a word. He doesn't need to ask what happened. He already knows. The sea has never looked quite like this. It isn't just blue anymore. It's layered, deep navy at the base, with streaks of coral pink and streaks of bronze reflecting a setting sun that feels slower. More deliberate. Like even time itself is easing into a sigh. You're back aboard the ship, but something's changed. Not the vessel, or the sky, or the crew, but you. There's a weight in your chest that's oddly comforting. Not heaviness. More like presence. Like carrying a full basket of something valuable. Dionysus stands at the bow, quiet, arms folded behind his back. He doesn't turn when he speaks. Do you know why pirates feared me? You blink. The wine? The tigers? The sudden transformation into sea mammals? All valid, he concedes with a smile. But it wasn't fear, really. Not the way we think of it. It was confusion. I disrupted order, shook certainty, made the predictable go sideways. He finally looks at you. And nothing unravels a tyrant faster than confusion. The ship sails on toward open sea. But it's not heading toward land. No island this time. Just horizon. You sit beside the mast, watching the sails ripple. You've changed, a voice says beside you. It's the old sailor with the missing tooth and the tattoo of a turnip. You've never been quite sure if he's crew or hallucination. You glance at him. Is that good? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. You noticed. That's enough. And then he disappears behind a coil of rope, as if he was never there. Dionysus appears again, hands you a small lyre. What am I supposed to do with this, you ask? Try telling a story without words, he replies, and see what you find. You pluck a string. The sound is soft, uncertain at first, but then resonates in your chest like the vibration of your own name whispered across a canyon. You strum again. This time, it sounds like something familiar. Not a melody you've heard, but one you've been. Others gather around. Mango curls beside your foot, blinking slowly. A sailor begins to hum. The cook taps on a pan rhythmically. Dionysus pours wine for the sky. Literally. He tips the cup upward, and the clouds drink it in with a faint shimmer. The story now isn't being told in words. It's a collective feeling. A rhythm passed between feet, breath, and heartbeat. Even the sea joins in, lapping in slow, metered waves against the hull. The stars begin to emerge, not in their usual constellations, but in swirling forms that shift with your music. You realize something profound, and very quiet. You are now carrying stories. Not just remembering them, or hearing them, but bearing them. Like an oracle with no prophecies, just presence. Like a wine cup passed from hand to hand. Historians still debate, Dionysus murmurs from somewhere behind you, whether myths are born from ritual, or rituals from myth. He exhales through his nose. But maybe both were just excuses for people to sit close and feel less alone. The music slows. You set the lyre down, gently. Silence blooms. Not empty. Sacred. A kind of silence that lets things settle. Sink in. Unfold. You rise and walk to the ship's edge. Far in the distance, something begins to glow. It's not an island. Not a city. It's the shape. Formless but vast. Made of color and memory. Shimmering with the glint of forgotten names. Your breath catches. You can't tell if it's beautiful or terrifying. Maybe both. Dionysus steps up beside you. You see it now, he says softly. The shape of the myth. You nod, mouth dry. What do I do with it? He smiles. You carry it. You let it change you. And one day, maybe you offer it to someone else. You stare out at the horizon for a long while. Not trying to understand it. Just trying to be with it. And then you close your eyes. And let the rhythm of the waves carry you forward. The sky is a deep, endless velvet now. No moon. Just stars, scattered like glowing seeds across a vast, quiet field. The ship glides so smoothly it hardly feels like movement at all. It's more like drifting through a memory that hasn't happened yet. You sit at the bow, feet dangling above the dark water, which mirrors the heavens so perfectly that you feel suspended in both. Dionysus stands beside you, holding a small amphora. Do you know, he says, what dolphins really are? You glance at him. You mean besides enchanted pirates? He smiles. They're reminders. Of what happens when cruelty meets joy and gets humbled. Of what becomes of men who mock the divine and find themselves singing instead of screaming. He pours the last of the wine into the sea. A quiet libation. For the ones who changed, he says. You watch as the liquid disperses in the water, then, slowly, is met by a ripple. Then another. And then the dolphins come. Dozens of them. Sleek and silver, gliding just below the surface, forming arcs and spirals like they're dancing in a language older than words. One leaps into the air with a laugh you swear you can hear, before vanishing into foam. And there, beneath them, the shape appears again. Not the sea. Not the sky. The myth. It's all around you now. Not a single story. Not even Dionysus's. But the whole weave of people and gods and monsters and bakers and shepherds and forgotten daughters and mistaken sea gods. It folds around you, warm and shimmering and incomprehensibly vast. You breathe it in. And you finally, fully understand. You're not here to finish the story. You're here to keep it going. The wind begins to rise. Soft, playful, full of ivy and spice. Dionysus sets a hand on your shoulder. I think it's time. You don't ask for what? Because you know. He hands you a reed flute. You lift it, breath catching in your throat, and begin to play. Badly, at first. Then less badly. Then, as the music rises, you feel the ship rising too. Not into the air, but into something. The boundary between myth and memory and dream thins like gauze, and the ship slips gently between the threads of the world. You hear laughter. Voices. A goat arguing with a scroll. A god with golden sandals shouting rhythmically at a stubborn olive tree. A story, told again and again and again. And this time, you're in it. Not as the hero. Not as the ending. But as the breath between verses. The pause that gives the next line space to unfold. Final 300 words, slow down here. The stars above drift slowly now. You lie on the deck, eyes half-lidded, the flute resting beside you. Dionysus is somewhere nearby, softly humming a song you can't place, but somehow know. The sea laps gently, like a heartbeat slowing into sleep. Everything is quiet. Warm. Familiar. You feel the boat drifting not through water anymore, but through lullaby. Through memory. Through a story that no longer needs telling to be felt. And it is here, in this hush, that your eyes begin to close. Not from exhaustion, but from peace. You've walked through temples and groves, spoken to gods and goats, eaten olives in places that no longer appear on maps. You've rode into the unknown and come back full. Not of answers, but of echoes. You are the vessel now. And even in silence, you carry the music forward. The sea whispers. The stars blink slower and slower. The wind hums one last note against the sails. And Dionysus leans close, voice as soft as ivy on stone, and sings. Sleep now, dear wanderer, wrapped in the wine dark. Cradle of stories half whispered, half true. The dolphins are circling, gentle and silent. They know you. They remember you. And tonight. So do I. End of script. Sweet dreams.